edition of the Histories of Polybius and one of the founding general editors of Blackwell's Encyclopedia of Ancient History. You are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, we hear.
Okay.
Yes, we hear.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm in no need of a screen share, so I just have the paper. My paper is called Conceptualizing Roman Citizenship, Sicilian Cities in the 3rd Century BCE. Interest in citizenship in the ancient Greek and Roman worlds is at a high point. Witness, as examples, the International Conference, Citizenship in Classical Antiquity, New Perspectives and Challenges, held at the University College London in July 2019, and collected essays in the volume A Companion to Citizenship in the Ancient Mediterranean, forthcoming with Routledge in 2022, I believe. For the latter, I have contributed a chapter titled Religion and Citizenship in Republican Rome, arguing that religious communities cut across citizen peregrine statuses and complicate commonplace notions of Roman citizenship itself. In this paper, I again try to destabilize common presumptions about Roman citizenship, arguing for a more elastic and flexible conceptualization. I do so by considering Republican Rome's interactions in the 3rd century BCE with several Sicilian Greek cities. In 3rd century Sicily, kinship diplomacy is plain to see, with the most famous case, of course, being the Mamertine's appeal to the Roman Senate, the event that precipitated the First Punic War. The evidence is both literary and epigraphical, and not nearly as extensive as we should like. But nonetheless, Rome's relations in the first half of the century with what would become its first overseas province supports an alternative scholarly lens to legalistic status hierarchies, keyways, and subordinate statuses as laid out in A.N. Sherwin-White's Magisterial, the Roman Citizenship. This alternative perspective views Roman citizenship, at least on some registers, as more porous and indefinite, analogous to Moses Finley's famous idea of a spectrum of statuses, but within the wide and pliable sphere of the international political arena. What is a citizen? In most general terms, there is something like a scholarly consensus on the main points. A citizen belongs to a particular state or nation and is publicly recognized as so belonging. In addition, a citizen has claim to certain rights or franchises, and this person, whether native or naturalized member of state or nation, is legally bound to observe certain rules and perform certain duties. This much, I trust, is uncontroversial, and I shall argue elements of such a definition apply to inhabitants of the Sicilian Greek cities in this period vis-a-vis the Roman Republic. Problems arise, however, as soon as we try to articulate citizenship in more precise terms, because there will inevitably be qualifications, distinctions, and degrees in citizen status, native birth, restrictions on naturalization, age and/or property requirements, gendered liabilities. Legal texts do not help us sort out the problems as easily as we might expect. For instance, in the first book of his Institutes, Gaius makes a promising start for thinking about citizenship by proposing two crucial criteria of legal status in civil law: birth, natio, and power, potestas. And I have two brief quotations from the Institutes here. The principal distinction, Gaius writes, in the law of persons is this, that all men are either free or slaves, Next, of free men, some are ingenui, freeborn, others libertini, freed. Freeborn are those born free, liberi. Freed are those manumitted from lawful slavery. And the other short passage, there is another division with reference to the law of persons. For some persons are their own masters, personae sui juris. Some are subject to others' authority, alieno iuri subjecti. Gaius's observations hardly provide a solid foundation for articulating citizenship. We can illustrate some of the resultant ambiguities for understanding citizenship in the Roman Republic. In Roman society, of course, not all free people living in Rome were citizens, nor were all freedmen, although most were a kind of qualified citizen. Some Roman citizens were freeborn, but they were not Roman citizens at birth. Citizen women could have potestas over slaves, but not over other free persons. A free citizen woman might not be under the power of another, but she could never vote. A freedman was in most cases a citizen sui juris, but he could never hold a magistracy. Many male citizens were unfree, insofar as they were in potestate of another, but they could vote and hold high office. A freeborn foreigner who was enfranchised could attain the highest magistracy. For example, Lucius Cornelius Balbus from Gades, consul suffectus in 40 BCE. One principle of division cuts across others, so that it is exceedingly difficult to arrive at a simple definition of the Roman citizen, which meant different things to different people in different times and places. Equally subjective are analytical lenses through which we choose to consider citizens and citizenship. One approach is to think in broad terms of society and culture in Greek and Roman communities, to consider citizens in terms of Hellenism, ta Hellenikon, or Romanization, with the primary focus resolving to a matter of cultural infiltration or assimilation. Another avenue is to examine political and legal institutions to the letter, and to trace their evolution through time in formalistic terms. It is commonplace orientation, that commonplace orientation, that I primarily challenge in this paper. Yet institutions do not exist in vacuo, but rather they are populated and enacted by human beings. Tracking citizenship can be less abstract and more vibrant by seeing political institutions in action, with an eye on individuals as active participants in creating political community. Would it be productive to talk about citizenship loosely in the case of non-Roman individuals or communities that forge common identities and common political communities on the stage of international diplomacy? Let us begin by further illustrating ambiguities of Roman citizenship. Consider, for example, Mutines, a Libyo-Phoenician from Hippu Acra, whom we meet in the pages of Polybius and Livy. Hannibal sent Mutines to Sicily in order to command the Numidian cavalry after the fall of Syracuse in autumn 211. For a time, he performed duties of his command admirably, but then switched sides, opening negotiations with the Roman consul Marcus Valerius Lavinus, and then surrendering Agrigentum to him in 210. Soon thereafter, all of Sicily went over to the Romans. As an accolade, the Senate authorized a tribunician bill in the plebeian assembly to grant Roman citizenship to Mutines. At this time, the Romans also rewarded Sosus of Syracuse and Moericus the Spaniard with handsome land grants, 500 jugera, in Sicily, and Roman citizenship for their assistance in the capture of Syracuse. What are we to make of such grants of the Roman citizen franchise? Were they honorific and empty? Or were Mutines, Sosus, and Mordicus, in some meaningful sense, Roman citizens. We can remain in Sicily, but go a little farther back in time in order to consider questions posed by imperial citizenship on a broader canvas. King Hero II of Syracuse, who reigned from 270 until 215, had been astute enough to back the right horse early on in the First Punic War, becoming Rome's trusted friend and ally for about a half century. Having signed a treaty with the Romans in 263, Hero had a relatively free hand in Sicily in the post-war period, presiding over a prosperous island, as evidenced by state-of-the-art bathing complexes in Syracuse, Megara Heblaia, and Morgantina. Historians consider Sicily to have become the first Roman province from 227, when Hero still had some 12 more years to reign. For many decades, Hero was the quintessential friendly king in Syracuse, ruling over a Roman client state. But clearly, his self-perceptions of his own status and that of his people in relation to the Roman Republic changed over those many years. Inhabitants of his realm were certainly not Roman citizens in any formal sense, but any foreign policy their king might undertake increasingly required the stamp of Roman approval. For instance, we may wonder how free Hero may have felt in any interactions with Massana, claiming homophilia with Rome in 264, Segesta, perhaps playing the card of Trojan ancestry, Kentoripai, an epigraphical text claiming Sunginia with Lanuvium and Rome by implication, and Eryx, with a focus on the sanctuary of Venus Erycina, whose cult was later brought to Rome. These Sicilian cities appear to have had early ties of kinship diplomacy with Rome. I shall return to them at the end of the paper. In any case, we can at least consider Hero as an intermediary between Roman policy and Syracusan citizens. How are we to understand the Syracusans' political position vis-a-vis Rome over the course of Hero's long reign? Do conventional formulations of Roman citizenship unduly distort the historical record by leaving them out of consideration? Romans, at least, never seem to have thought much about it. If they had, they most certainly would not have felt bound by any claims Syracusan citizens might have placed on the Roman government. When Hero II's grandson, Hieronymus, succeeded to the throne, he haughtily attempted to go his own way in courting the Carthaginians, only to be assassinated in a chaotic whirlwind of events 13 months into his reign. The Romans lost no time in attacking their long-standing ally, and after a protracted siege, they sacked Syracuse in a brutal bloodbath, in which the ingenious theoretical mathematician and mechanical engineer Archimedes perished at the hands of a looting Roman legionary soldier. Flash forward to the late Republic, and the question of Roman citizenship and Sicilians is no less perplexing. What are we to make of Antony's grant of citizenship to the islanders in the aftermath of Caesar's assassination? What sort of rights, duties, obligations, and privileges did Sicilians either enjoy or endure as a result? Some recent directions in the study of the Hellenistic and Middle Roman Republican worlds seem to blunt such questions. Arthur M. Eckstein's systemic approach is fruitful in many respects, but critique of some aspects of it brings out the point I wish to make here. Terms like center, metropole, systemic balance, and periphery easily become homogenizing and reductionist. Distorting rigidity is an ever-present danger. It is not unfair to say that Kenneth Waltz's international relations theory, the inspiration for Eckstein's systemic analyses, of Greek and Roman antiquity, invites us to see polities as static unit aggregates. They are of interest only insofar as their behaviors reveal deterministic rules of the system of which they are a part. In the default condition of state systems, one of a highly competitive, zero-sum international anarchy, one actor might benefit from collapse of another player or become the primary beneficiary of bandwagoning against a targeted rival. As a consequence, this unit aggregate may be able to seize the imperial moment, as it were, eventually emerging as an imperial metropole and bringing order and stability, however brief or lasting in duration, to international anarchy. This is a seductive model. It helps us to see Republican Rome on a broader canvas, and Eckstein has performed a great service in illuminating the ancient world in this theoretical light. But the price tag is high, the sacrifice great. This scholarly lens glosses over historical nuances and threatens to blur a particular historical society's idiosyncrasies and exceptionalism. Rigid conceptual boundaries separating imperial metropole and subjected periphery can occlude more than they illuminate. At this point, Heraclitus's famous maxim, Panta Re, comes into play. The imperial center changes the imperial periphery and vice versa. While the victor imposes itself in various ways upon the defeated, in the cultural sphere, it may receive more than it gives. Within this neo-realist paradigm, religious practices make up one neglected vector in the formation of imperial communities. Recent scholarship, such as Dan L. Padilla Peralta's Divine Institutions, engaged with archaeological discoveries and anthropological and sociological models, invites us to reconceptualize religion's role in forming Republican Rome, supplying more nuanced answers to Polybius's challenging question: how did the Romans come to dominate the Mediterranean world in such a short space of time? By directing our attention away from political and military conflicts. Instead, religious, cultural, and socioeconomic transformations, mass movements of people, including itinerant craftsmen, shippers, and traders, local elites as power brokers between Roman expansion and their communities of origin, and new forms of building networks and infrastructure, including construction of temples and sanctuaries, take center stage. The important point is that here we have moved fluidly beyond states as static unit aggregates. We enter a conceptual landscape of mobility corridors and labyrinthine social networks in which new collective and overlapping identities were forged. This work advances our understanding of Roman expansion and religion's role in it, even if it still labors with some conceptual terminology like statehood, imperial strategy, or citizenship itself that may introduce historical distortions. One form of building extensive political communities with religious overtones was by means of kinship diplomacy, and this brings us back to the Sicilian cities. Among overtures made by Sicilian polis to Roman authorities were claims of shared homophilia or sungenea. 5 cities, Messana, Segesta, Centoripae, Eryx, and Haluntium, evoked consanguinity with Romans. The Oscan-speaking Mamertines at Messana, of course, posed as homophiloi of Romans in 264, notably against the threat of Hero II in Syracuse. Segesta made deditio to Rome in late 263. In doing so, the Segestans played upon putatively common Trojan ancestry. Kenteripai was besieged in 263 by both consuls after the fall of Hadrianum. Halysa surrendered to Rome and probably treated on behalf of Kenteripai as well. And on evidence of Cicero, Kenteripai may have relayed a story of cognatio with Rome, as Segesta did at this time. A long-standing tradition, including Trojan antecedents, obtained at Eryx in the northwestern part of the island. And here, the Romans were most likely more than passive partners in traditional worship of Venus Erycina. A tradition that Patron, Aeneas's Acarnanian guide, founded Sicilian Haluntum may represent another Sicilian kinship gambit with Rome. Finally, it appears that by the end of the First Punic War, circa 241 BCE, 17 Sicilian cities contributed to a garrison of 200 soldiers protecting the sanctuary of Venus Erycina, a ripe stage for playing out fictive genealogical ties with the Romans. Two of these garrisons, Poles, Halysa, and Segesta, gained tax exemption, or immunitas, from Rome, and one of them, Segesta, indisputably employed tactics of kinship diplomacy with Rome. In trying to come to terms with kinship diplomacy of Sicilian Greek cities with Rome in the 3rd century BCE, a judicious resort to international relations theory provides some insights. Following Syracuse's lead, many cities sided with Rome over and against Carthage in a process often called bandwagoning in Waltzian terms. Several poleis under direct Roman control during the First Punic War, Panormus, Halykii, Halysa, Kenteripai, and Segesta, gained tax exemptions, immunitates, from Rome, with the latter two certainly, and others most likely, having engaged in kinship diplomacy with Rome. Romans ruled Sicily with a light hand, imposing no new taxes and employing the established lex Heronica. And incidentally, there is evidence that by Cicero's day at least, Sicilian identity could be meaningful in cases at Roman law. Diplomatic strategy of 3rd century Sicilian Greek cities may be viewed as more than simple bandwagoning against Carthaginian power on the island. It also provided leverage against Syracuse, and it is well to remember that at the time of many of the initial appeals to Rome, Syracuse seemed as much a threat to political independence as did Carthage. Although Hero II quickly sided with Rome at the outbreak of the First Punic War, the Syracusan king's political and cultural ambitions did not disappear. Jonathan Pragg has written of Hero's competitive ergotism, his Sicilian presence at the Olympic Games, and monumental building at Syracuse. Understandings with Rome through kinship diplomacy on the part of Sicilian Greek poleis can be seen as protection and a curb against possible ambitions of Hero II. During the 3rd century BCE, Sicilian Greek cities were undoubtedly increasingly drawn into the Roman hegemonial orbit. It was neither a one-way process of push from the imperial center, nor one of pull from a subjected periphery. We should rather think in terms of contingency, diplomatic interaction, and dialogic integration. While the individual Sosus of Syracuse was granted Roman citizenship late in this period, far more important are Sicilian cities in earlier decades with special statuses vis-a-vis Rome. Inhabitants of Segesta, for example, enjoyed tax immunitas and apparently acknowledged cognatio with Rome. As a point in contrast, we might remember that Roman citizens in Italy were subjected to direct taxation, tributum, until 167 BCE, beginning, according to Livy, as early as the 5th century. Segestans, of course, did not attend contiones or vote in electoral or legislative committee at Rome, but neither in practice did communities of any political status throughout peninsular Italy that were at a significant spatial remove from the metropole. Material presented in this paper, taken piecemeal in itemized fashion, offers nothing new. But viewed collectively through scholarly, methodological, and theoretical lenses not commonly employed in the study of Roman citizenship, its takeaway is significant and important. Sicilian Greek cities in the 3rd century BCE open up conceptual space for fresh ways to think about the burgeoning Roman imperial community, a space in which attention to overly formal notions of Roman citizenship may be of diminishing returns. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. Do you have questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Thank you.
And thanks for stimulating and interesting lecture. I wonder whether, in view of what we just heard, you would agree or disagree with Christopher Jones's conclusion as regards kinship diplomacy, that it came in effect to an end with the decreasing importance of the Greek city within the Roman Empire. And as a second element, he also thinks that monotheism, Christianity, would impact the working of the system. Would you agree with those theses of his, or am I wrong and you disagree?
I think you must be referring to the 1999 book that he wrote on kinship diplomacy.
Yes.
But anyway, I think I would hedge a bit and agree on the long view. I would be reluctant to agree so much in this early period of the 3rd century BCE, where so much of this is in its very formative stages. I don't think that we can think about the political eclipse of Greek cities in some sort of causal relationship with this kinship diplomacy this early.
I see. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do you want a question?
Well, I have a question, if I can ask. Yeah?
Of course.
In order to exercise Roman citizenship, one had to be enrolled in a Roman tribe. Now, in the case of these individual Sicilians you mentioned who were granted Roman citizenship, is there any evidence that they were formally enrolled in a tribe as part of the process?
No, and there's no evidence that they spent much time in Rome itself.
Well, of course, many people who had Roman citizenship never went to Rome, especially later when the whole of Italy had Roman citizenship. People didn't go to Rome to vote. But the question is whether they formally were members of some tribe. Of course, with freedmen, of course, we know that they were enrolled in one of the city tribes. But these other cases, was there any provision of this kind? So that formally they would belong to some tribe as one of the marks of having been granted citizenship?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm almost certain of it, there is no evidence that any of these communities or individuals at this time were. And, I think that my paper really it's only worth thinking about insofar as we remember that Rome never developed any sort of polling stations or system of representative government. In order to engage politically as a citizen, as we all know, one needed to be present in the city itself. And when we start to think of Roman citizenship and increasing numbers of Roman citizens that don't fit that description, then I would argue we can begin to think more loosely about how we should understand communities and individuals in a place like 3rd century BCE Sicily.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Craig. Citizenship, Roman citizenship